Section 28 of the Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Charles Bice. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Book 5. An account of countries, nations, seas, towns, havens, mountains, rivers, distances, and peoples who now exist or formerly existed. Chapter 1. The Two Mauritanias. The Greeks have given the name of Libya to Africa, and have called the sea that lies in front of it the Libyan Sea. It has Egypt for its boundary, and no part of the earth is there that has fewer gulfs or inlets, its shores extending in a lengthened line from the west in an oblique direction. The names of its peoples and its cities in especial cannot possibly be pronounced with correctness except by the aid of their own native tongues. Its population, too, for the most part, dwells only in fortresses. 1. On our entrance into Africa, we find the two Mauritanias, which until the time of Caius Caesar, the son of Germanicus, were kingdoms, but, suffering under his cruelty, they were divided into two provinces. The extreme promontory of Africa, which projects into the ocean, is called Ampelusia by the Greeks. There were formerly two towns, Lissa and Kate, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, but at the present day we only find that of Tingi, which was formerly founded by Antaeus, and afterwards received the name of Traducta Julia from Claudius Caesar, when he established a colony there. It is 30 miles distant from Belon, a town of Baetica. There the passage across is the shortest. At a distance of 25 miles from Tingi, upon the shores of the ocean, we come to Julia Constantia Zilis, a colony of Augustus. This place is exempt from all subjection to the kings of Mauritania, and is included in the legal jurisdiction of Baetica. 32 miles distant from Julia Constantia is Lixos, which was made a Roman colony by Claudius Caesar, and which has been the subject of such wondrous fables related by the writers of antiquity. At this place, according to the story, was the palace of Antaeus. This was the scene of his combat with Hercules, and here were the gardens of the Hesperides. An arm of the sea flows into the land here, with a serpentine channel, and, from the nature of the locality, this is interpreted at the present day as having been what was really represented by the story of the dragon keeping guard there. This tract of water surrounds an island, the only spot which is never overflowed by the tides of the sea, although not quite so elevated as the rest of the land in its vicinity. Upon this island also there is still in existence the altar of Hercules, but of the grove that bore the golden fruit there are no traces left, beyond some wild olive trees. People will certainly be the less surprised at the marvelous falsehoods of the Greeks, which have been related about this place and the river Lixos, when they reflect that some of our own countrymen as well, and that too very recently, have related stories in reference to them hardly less monstrous, how that this city is remarkable for its power and extensive influence, and how that it is even greater than great Carthage ever was, how too that it is situate just opposite to Carthage, and at an almost immeasurable distance from Tingi, together with other details of a similar nature, all of which Cornelius Nepos has believed with the most insatiate credulity. In the interior, at a distance of 40 miles from Lixos, is Baba, surnamed Julia Campestris, another colony of Augustus, and at a distance of 75, a third called Banassa, with the surname of Valentia. At a distance of 35 miles from this last is the town of Volubilis, which is just that distance also from both seas. On the coast, at a distance of 50 miles from Lixos, is the river Serber, which flows past the colony of Banasa, a fine river and available for the purposes of navigation. At the same distance from it is the city of Sala, situate on a river which bears the same name, a place which stands upon the very verge of the desert, and though infested by troops of elephants, is much more exposed to the attacks of the nation of the Autolols, through whose country lies the road to Mount Atlas, the most fabulous locality even in Africa. It is from the midst of the sands, according to the story, that this mountain raises its head to the heavens, rugged and craggy on the side which looks toward the shores of the ocean, to which it has given its name, while on that which faces the interior of Africa it is shaded by dense groves of trees, and refreshed by flowing streams, fruits of all kinds springing up there spontaneously to such an extent as to more than satiate every possible desire. Throughout the daytime no inhabitant is to be seen. All is silent, like that dreadful stillness which reigns in the desert. A religious horror steals imperceptibly over the feelings of those who approach, and they feel themselves smitten with awe at the stupendous aspect of its summit, which reaches beyond the clouds, and well nigh approaches the very orb of the moon. At night, they say, it gleams with fires innumerable lighted up. It is then the scene of the gambols of the Egyptians and the satyr crew, while it re-echoes with the notes of the flute and the pipe and the clash of drums and cymbals. All this is what authors of high character have stated, in addition to the labors which Hercules and Perseus there experienced. The space which intervenes before you arrive at this mountain is immense, and the country quite unknown. There formerly existed some commentaries written by Hauno, a Carthaginian general who was commanded, in the most flourishing times of the Punic state, to explore the sea-coast of Africa. The greater part of the Greek and Roman writers have followed him, and have related, among other fabulous stories, that many cities there were founded by him, of which no remembrance nor yet the slightest vestige now exists. While Scipio Aemilianus held the command in Sicily, Polybius the historian received a fleet from him for the purpose of proceeding on a voyage of discovery in this part of the world. He relates that beyond Mount Atlas, proceeding in a westerly direction, there are forests filled with wild beasts, peculiar to the soil of Africa, as far as the river Anatis, a distance of 485 miles, Lixos being distant from it 205 miles. Agrippa says that Lixos is distant from the Straits of Gadis 112 miles. After it we come to a gulf which is called the Gulf of Saguti, a town situate on the promontory of Mulilaka, the rivers Serbur and Salat, and the port of Rutubis, distant from Lixos 213 miles. We then come to the promontory of the Sun, the port of Rasardir, the Getulian Autolols, the river Cosinus, the nations of the Selatiti and the Masati, the river Masathat, and the river Darat, in which crocodiles are found. After this we come to a large gulf, 616 miles in extent, which is enclosed by a promontory of Mount Barce, which runs out in a westerly direction and is called Sorrentium. Next comes the river Sausus, beyond which lie the Ethiopian Pororsi, at the back of whom are the Pharusii, who are bordered upon by the Getulian Dari, lying in the interior. Upon the coast again we find the Ethiopian Daratiti and the river Bambotus, teeming with crocodiles and hippopotami. From this river there is a continuous range of mountains till we come to the one which is known by the name of Theon Okema, from which to the Hesperian promontory is a voyage of 10 days and nights, and in the middle of this space he has placed Mount Atlas, which by all other writers has been stated to be the extreme parts of Mauritania. The Roman arms for the first time pursued their conquests into Mauritania under the Emperor Claudius, when the freedman Idemon took up arms to avenge the death of King Ptolemy, who had been put to death by Caius Caesar. And it is a well-known fact that on the flight of the barbarians our troops reached Mount Atlas. It became a boast not only among men of consular rank and generals selected from the Senate, who at that time held the command, but among persons of equestrian rank as well, who after that period held the government there, that they had penetrated as far as Mount Atlas. There are, as we have already stated, 5 Roman colonies in this province, and it may very possibly appear, if we listen only to what report says, that this mountain is easily accessible. Upon trial, however, it has been pretty generally shown that all such statements are utterly fallacious, and it is too true that men in high station, when they are disinclined to take the trouble of inquiring into the truth, through a feeling of shame at their ignorance, are not averse to be guilty of falsehood, and never is implicit credence more readily given than when a falsehood is supported by the authority of some personage of high consideration. For my own part, I am far less surprised that there are still some facts remaining undiscovered by men of the equestrian order, and even those among them who have attained senatorial rank, than that the love of luxury has left anything unascertained, the impulse of which must be great indeed, than that the love of luxury has left anything unascertained, the impulse of which must be great indeed, and most powerfully felt when the very forests are ransacked for their ivory and citron wood, and all the rocks of Getulia are searched for the murex and the purple. From the natives, however, we learn that on the coast, at a distance of 150 miles from the Salat, the river Asana presents itself. Its waters are salt, but it is remarkable for its fine harbor. They also say that after this we come to a river known by the name of Fut, and then after crossing another called Vior, which lies on the road at a distance of 200 miles, we arrive at Dairis, such being the name which in their language they give to Mount Atlas. According to their story, there are still existing in its vicinity many vestiges which tend to prove that the locality was once inhabited, such as the remains of vineyards and plantations of palm trees. Suetonius Paulinus, whom we have seen consul in our own time, was the first Roman general who advanced a distance of some miles beyond Mount Atlas. He has given us the same information as we have received from other sources with reference to the extraordinary height of this mountain, and at the same time he has stated that all the lower parts about the foot of it are covered with dense and lofty forests composed of trees of species hitherto unknown. The height of the trees, he says, is remarkable. The trunks are without knots and of a smooth and glossy surface. The foliage is like that of the cypress, and besides sending forth a powerful odor, they are covered with a flossy down, from which, by the aid of art, a fine cloth might easily be manufactured, similar to the textures made from the produce of the silkworm. He informs us that the summit of the mountain is covered with snow even in summer, and says that having arrived there after a march of 10 days, he proceeded some distance beyond it as far as a river which bears the name of Ger, the road being through deserts covered with a black sand, from which rocks that bore the appearance of having been exposed to the action of fire projected every here and there, localities rendered quite uninhabitable by the intensity of the heat, as he himself experienced, although it was in the winter season that he visited them. We also learn from the same source that the people who inhabit the adjoining forests, which are full of all kinds of elephants, wild beasts, and serpents, have the name of Canarii, from the circumstance that they partake of their food in common with the canine race, and share with it the entrails of wild beasts. It is a well-known fact that adjoining to these localities is a nation of Ethiopians, which bears the name of Perorsi. Juba, the father of Ptolemy, who was the first king who reigned over both Mauritanias, and who has been rendered even more famous by the brilliancy of his learning than by his kingly rank, has given us similar information relative to Mount Atlas, and states that a certain herb grows there, which has received the name of euphorbia from that of his physician, who was the first to discover it. Juba extols with wondrous praises the milky juice of this plant as tending to improve the sight, and acting as a specific against the bites of serpents and all kinds of poison. And to this subject alone he has devoted an entire book. Thus much, if indeed not more than enough, Mount Atlas. 2. The province of Tingitana is 170 miles in length. Of the nations in this province, the principal one was formerly that of Mori, who have given to it the name of Mauritania, and have been by many writers called the Morusii. This nation has been greatly weakened by the disasters of war, and is now dwindled down to a few families only. Next to the Mori was formerly the nation of the Masicili. They, in a similar manner, have become extinct. Their country is now occupied by the Getulian nations, the Baniuri, the Autolols, by far the most powerful people among them all, and the Vasuni, who formerly were part of the Autolols, but have now separated from them, and turning their steps towards the Ethiopians, have formed a distinct nation of their own. This province in the mountainous district, which lies on its eastern side, produces elephants, as also on the heights of Mount Abila, and among those elevations which from the similarity of their height are called the Seven Brothers. Joining the range of the Abila, these mountains overlook the Straits of Gades. At the extremity of this chain begin the shores of the inland sea, and we come to the Tamuda, a navigable stream, with the site of a former town of the same name, and then the river Loud, which is also navigable for vessels, the town and port of Rissadir, and Malvawe, a navigable stream. The city of Siga, formerly the residence of King Sifax, lies opposite to that of Malacca in Spain, and now belongs to the second Mauritania. But these countries, I should remark, for a long time retained the names of their respective kings, the further Mauritania being called the land of Bogud, while that which is now called the Caesariensis was called the country of Bocchus. After passing Siga, we come to the haven called Portus Magnus, from its great extent, with a town whose people enjoy the rights of Roman citizens, and then the river Molucca, which served as the limit between the territory of Bocchus and that of the Masicili. Next to this is Chiesa Zenitana, a town founded by strangers, and Arsenaria, a place with the ancient Latin rites, 3 miles distant from the sea. We then come to Cartena, a colony founded under Augustus by the 2nd Legion, and Gunugum, another colony founded by the same emperor, a praetorian cohort being established there. The promontory of Apollo, and a most celebrated city, now called Caesarea, but formerly known by the name of Iol. This place was the residence of King Juba, and received the rights of a colony from the now defied Emperor Claudius. Opidum Novum is the next place. A colony of veterans was established here by command of the same emperor. Next to it is Tipasa, which has received Latin rights, as also Icasium, which has been presented by the Emperor Vespasianus with similar rights. Rusconiae, a colony founded by Augustus. Rusicurium, honored by Claudius with the rights of Roman citizens. Ruzacus, a colony founded by Augustus. Salde, another colony founded by the same emperor. Igilgili, another, and the town of Tuca, situate on the seashore and upon the river Ampsaga. In the interior are the colony of Augusta, also called Sucabar, Tubusuptus, the cities of Timiki and Tigavi, the rivers Sardabal, Aves, and Nabar, the nation of the Makirebi, the river Usar, and the nation of the Nababes. The river Ampsaga is distant from Caesarea 322 miles. The length of the two Mauritanias is 1,038, and their breadth 467 miles. Chapter 2, parenthesis 3, Numidia. At the river Amsaga, Numidia begins, a country rendered illustrious by the fame of Massinissa. By the Greeks this region was called Metagonitis, and the Numidians received the name of Nomades from their frequent changes of pasturage, upon which occasions they were accustomed to carry their mapalia, or in other words their houses, upon wagons. The towns of this country are Kalu and Rusicade, and at a distance of 48 miles from the latter, in the interior, is the colony of Cirta, surnamed of the Sitiani. Still more inland is another colony called Sica, with the free town of Bula Regia. On the coast are Tacutua, Hippo Regius, the river Armua, and the town of Tabraca, with the rights of Roman citizens. The river Tusca forms the boundary of Numidia. This country produces nothing remarkable except its marble and wild beasts. Chapter 3, parenthesis 4, Africa. Beyond the river Tusca begins the region of Zugitana, and that part which properly bears the name of Africa. We here find 3 promontories: the White Promontory, the promontory of Apollo, facing Sardinia, and that of Mercury, opposite to Sicily. Projecting into the sea, these headlands form 2 gulfs, the first of which bears the name of Hipponensis, from its proximity to the city called Hippodiarrhytus, a corruption of the Greek name Diarrhytus, which it has received from the channels made for irrigation. Adjacent to this place, but at a greater distance from the seashore, is Thudalis, a town exempt from tribute. We then come to the promontory of Apollo, and upon the second gulf we find Utica, a place enjoying the rights of Roman citizens, and famous for the death of Cato, the river Bagreda, the place called Castra Cornelia, the colony of Carthage, founded upon the remains of Great Carthage, the colony of Maxula, the towns of Carpi, Misua, and Clypea, the last a free town, on the promontory of Mercury, also Curubis, a free town, and Neapolis. Here commences the second division of Africa, properly so called. Those who inhabit Byzacium have the name of Libyphonices. Byzacium is the name of a district which is 250 miles in circumference, and is remarkable for its extreme fertility, as the ground returns the seed sown by the husbandman with interest 100-fold. Here are the free towns of Leptis, Adrumetum, Ruspina, and Thapsus, and then Thini, Macumades, Tacape, and Sabrata, which touches the lesser Syrtis, to which spot, from the Ampsaga, the length of Numidia and Africa is 580 miles, and the breadth, so far it has been ascertained, 200. That portion which we have called Africa is divided into 2 provinces, the Old and the New. These are separated by a dike, which was made by order of the second Scipio Africanus and the kings, and extended to Thini, which town is distant from Carthage 216 miles. End of section 28. Recording by Charles Bice. www.charlesbice.com. Courtesy of Wimabi Press.
Section 29 of the Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Harry Thomas Riley. Section 29. Chapter 4. The Syrtes. A third gulf is divided into 2 smaller ones, those of the 2 Syrtes, which are rendered perilous by the shallow of their quicksands and the ebb and flow of the sea. Polybius states the distance from Carthage to the lesser Syrtes, the one which is nearest to it, to be 300 miles. The inlet to it he also states to be 100 miles across, and its circumference 300. There's also a way to it by land, to find which we must employ the guidance of the stars, and cross deserts which present nothing but sand and serpents. After passing these, we come to forests filled with vast multitudes of wild beasts and elephants, then desert wastes, and beyond them the Garamantes, distant 12 days' journey from the Augili. Above the Garamantes was formerly the nation of the Psylli, and above them again the lake of Lycomedes, surrounded with deserts. The Augili themselves are situate almost midway between Ethiopia, which faces the west, and the region which lies between the two Syrtes, at an equal distance from both. The distance along the coast that lies between the two Syrtes is 250 miles. On it are found the city of Ia, the river Sinipes, and the country of that name, the towns of Neapolis, Graphera, and Abrotonum, and the second, surnamed the Greater Leptis. We next come to the Greater Syrtes, 625 miles in circumference, and at the entrance 312 miles in width, next after which dwells the nation of the Sissipides. At the bottom of this gulf was the coast of the Lotophagi, whom some writers have called the Alacroe, extending as far as the altars of the Philenae. These altars are formed of heaps of sand. On passing these, not far from the shore, there is a vast swamp, which receives the river Triton, and from it takes its name. By Callimachus it is called Polontius, and is said by him to be on the nearer side of the Lesser Syrtes. Many other writers, however, place it between the two Syrtes. The promontory which bounds the Greater Syrtes has the name of Borean. Beyond it is the province of Cyrene. Africa, from the river Ampsaga to this limit, includes 516 peoples, who are subject to the Roman sway, of which 6 are colonies, among them Uthina and Taberbai, besides those already mentioned. The towns enjoying the rights of Roman citizens are 15 in number, of which I shall mention, as lying in the interior, those of Assure, Abatucum, Aborium, Canopicum, Silma, Simithium, Thunasidium, Tabernicum, Tynedrumum, Tibiga, the 2 towns called Ucida, the Greater and the Lesser, and Vaga. There is also 1 town with Latin rights, Utzalita by name, and 1 town of tributaries, Castra Cornelia. The free towns are 30 in number, among which we may mention, in the interior, those of Accola, Agerida, Avina, Abzirita, Canopida, Milicida, Matera, Salafida, Tasdrida, Tiffica, Tunica, Theuda, Tagasta, Taiga, Elisibrida, a second Vaga, Visa, and Zama. Of the remaining number, most of them should be called, in strictness, not only cities, but nations even. Such, for instance, as the Natabadas, the Capsitani, the Musulami, the Sabarbaris, the Massili, the Nisivis, the Vemicures, the Sinithai, the Musunai, the Marcubii, and the whole of Getulia, as far as the river Nigris, which separates Africa proper from Ethiopia. Chapter 5. Cyrenaica. The region of Cyrenaica, also called Pentapolis, is rendered famous by the oracle of Hammon, which is distant 400 miles from the city of Cyrene, also by the fountain of the sun there, and 5 cities in special, those of Berenice, Arsinoe, Ptolemais, Apollonia, and Cyrene itself. Berenice is situated upon the outer promontory that bounds the Syrtes. It was formerly called the city of the Hesperides, previously mentioned, according to the fables of the Greeks, which very often change their localities. Not far from this city, and running before it, is the river Lethen, and with it a sacred grove, where the gardens of the Hesperides are said to have formerly stood. This city is distant from Leptis 375 miles. From Berenice to Arsinoe, commonly called Teucria, is 43 miles, after which, at a distance of 22, we come to Ptolemais, the ancient name of which was Barci, and at a distance of 40 miles from this last, the promontory of Phycus, which extends far away into the Cretan Sea, being 350 miles distant from Taenarum, the promontory of Laconia, and from Crete 225. After passing this promontory we come to Cyrene, which stands at a distance of 11 miles from the sea. From Phycus to Apollonia is 24 miles, and from thence to the Chersonesus 88, from which to the Cathabathmus is a distance of 216 miles. The Marmoridae inhabit this coast, extending from almost the region of Peritonium to the Greater Syrtis; after them the Eryroceles, and then, upon the coasts of the Syrtis, the Nasemones, whom the Greeks formerly called Mesamones, from the circumstance of their being located in the very midst of sands. The territory of Cyrene, to a distance of 15 miles from the shore, is said to abound in trees, while for the same distance beyond that district it is only suitable for the cultivation of corn; after which a tract of land 30 miles in breadth and 250 in length is productive of nothing but lazer or silphium. After the Nasemones we come to the dwellings of the Asbiste and Masse, and beyond them, at 11 days' journey to the west of the Greater Syrtis, the Amantes, a people also surrounded by sands in every direction. They find water, however, without any difficulty, at a depth mostly of about 2 cubits, and their district receives the overflow of the waters of Mauritania. They build houses with blocks of salt, which they cut out of their mountains, just as we do stone. From this nation to the Troglodytae the distance is 7 days' journey in a south-westerly direction. A people with whom our only intercourse is for the purpose of procuring from them the precious stone which we call the carbuncle, and which is brought from the interior of Ethiopia. Upon the road to this last people, but turning off towards the deserts of Africa, of which we have previously made mention as lying beyond the Lesser Syrtis, is the region of Phazania. The nation of Phazanii, belonging to which, as well as the cities of Aleli and Siliba, we have subdued by force of arms, as also Sidemus, which lies over against Sabrata. After passing these places, a range of mountains extends in a prolonged chain from east to west. These have received from our people the name of the Black Mountains, either from the appearance which they naturally bear of having been exposed to the action of fire, or else from the fact that they have been scorched by the reflection of the sun's rays. Beyond it is the desert, and then Talge, a city of the Garamantes, and Debris, at which place there is a spring, the waters of which, from noon to midnight, are at boiling heat, and then freeze for as many hours until the following noon. Garama, too, that most famous capital of the Garamantes, all which places have been subdued by the Roman arms. It was on this occasion that Cornelius Balbus was honored with a triumph, the only foreigner indeed that was ever honored with a triumphal chariot, and presented with the rights of a Roman citizen. For although by birth a native of Gades, the Roman citizenship was granted to him, as well as to the elder Balbus, his uncle by the father's side. There is also this remarkable circumstance, that our writers have handed down to us the names of the cities above mentioned as having been taken by Balbus, and have informed us that on the occasion of his triumph, besides Cedamus and Gerema, there were carried in the procession the names and models of all the other nations and cities, in the following order: the town of Tabudium, the nation of Nityeres, the town of Nigligemella, the nation or town of Bubaeum, the nation of Enipai, the town of Thuban, the mountain known as the Black Mountain, Nitibrim, the towns called Rapsa, the nation of Desera, the town of Debri, the river Nethaber, the town of Thepsagim, the nation of Nanagi, the town of Boan, the town of Pigi, the river Dasiberi, and then the towns, in the following order, of Bericum, Balubba, Olacid, Gallia, Bala, Maxala, Dedzama, and Mount Gyrai, which was preceded by an inscription stating that this was the place where precious stones were produced. Up to the present time it has been found impracticable to keep open the road that leads to the country of the Garamantes, as the predatory bands of that nation have filled up the wells with sand, which do not require to be dug for to any great depth if you only have a knowledge of the locality. In the late war, however, which at the beginning of the reign of the Emperor Vespasian the Romans carried on with the people of Aea, a short cut of only 4 days' journey was discovered. This road is known as the Praetor Caput Saxae. The last place in the territory of Cyrenaica is Catabathmus, consisting of a town and a valley with a sudden and steep descent. The length of Cyrenaean Africa up to this boundary from the Lesser Syrtes is 1,060 miles, and so far as has been ascertained, it is 800 cubic miles in breadth. Chapter 6. Libya Mariotis. The region that follows is called Libya Mariotis, and borders upon Egypt. It is held by the Marmaridae, the Adremachidae, and after them the Mariotae. The distance from Catabathmus to Parætonium is 86 miles. In this district is Apis, a place rendered famous by the religious belief of Egypt. From this town Parætonium is distant 62 miles, and from thence to Alexandria the distance is 200 miles, the breadth of the district being 169. Eratosthenes says that it is 525 miles by land from Cyrene to Alexandria, while Agrippa gives the length of the whole of Africa from the Atlantic Sea and including Lower Egypt as 3,040 miles. Polybius and Eratosthenes, who are generally considered as remarkable for their extreme correctness, state the length to be, from the ocean to Great Carthage, 1,100 miles, and from Carthage to Canopus, the nearest mouth of the Nile, 1,628 miles, while Isidorus speaks of the distance from Tingi to Canopus as being 3,599 miles. Artemidorus makes this last distance 40 miles less than Isidorus. Chapter 7. The islands in the vicinity of Africa. These seas contain not so very many islands. The most famous among them is Meninx, 25 miles in length and 22 in breadth. By Eratosthenes it is called Lotophagaitis. This island has 2 towns, Meninx on the side which faces Africa, and Troas on the other. It is situated off the promontory which lies on the right-hand side of the Lesser Syrtes, at a distance of 1.5 miles. 100 miles from this island, and opposite the promontory that lies on the left, is the free island of Cercina, with a city of the same name. It is 25 miles long, and half that breadth at the place where it is the widest, but not more than 5 miles across at the extremity. The diminutive island of Cercinides, which looks towards Carthage, is united to it by a bridge. At a distance of nearly 50 miles from these is the island of Lopedusa, 6 miles in length, and beyond it Gaulis and Galata, the soil of which kills the scorpion, that noxious reptile of Africa. It is also said that the scorpion will not live at Clypea, opposite to which place lies the island of Casyra, with a town of the same name. Opposite to the Gulf of Carthage are the 2 islands known as the Egimurae. The altars, which are rather rocks than islands, lie more between Sicily and Sardinia. There are some authors who state that these rocks were once inhabited, but that they have gradually subsided in the sea. Chapter 8. Countries on the other side of Africa. If we pass through the interior of Africa in a southerly direction, beyond the Getuli, after having traversed the intervening deserts, we shall find, first of all, the Libyan Egyptians, and then the country where the Leucithiopians dwell. Beyond these are the Negritae, nations of Ethiopia, so called from the river Nigris, which has been previously mentioned, the Gymnetes, surnamed Pharusiae, and, on the very margin of the ocean, the Perorsai, whom we have already spoken of as lying on the boundaries of Mauritania. After passing all these peoples, there are vast deserts towards the east, until we come to the Garamantes, the Augili, and the Troglodytae. The opinion of those being exceedingly well founded who place 2 Ethiopias beyond the deserts of Africa, and more particularly that expressed by Homer, who tells us that the Ethiopians are divided into 2 nations, those of the east and those of the west. The river Nigris has the same characteristics as the Nile. It produces the calamus, the papyrus, and just the same animals, and it rises at the same seasons of the year. Its source is between the Tyrolean Ethiopians and the Icali Sea. Magium, the city of the latter people, has been placed by some writers amid the deserts, and next to them the Atlantes. Then the Igipani, half men, half beasts, the Blemmyes, the Gamphazentes, the Satyri, and the Hymentopodes. The Atlantes, if we believe what is said, have lost all characteristics of humanity, for there is no mode of distinguishing each other among them by names, and as they look upon the rising and the setting sun, they give utterance to direful imprecations against it, as being deadly to themselves and their lands, nor are they visited with dreams like the rest of mortals. The Troglodytae make excavations in the earth, which serve them for dwellings. The flesh of serpents is their food. They have no articulate voice, but only utter a kind of squeaking noise, and thus are they utterly destitute of all means of communication by language. The Garamantes have no institution of marriage among them, and live in promiscuous concubinage with their women. The Augili worship no deities, but the gods of the infernal regions. The Gamphazentes, who go naked and are unacquainted with war, hold no intercourse whatever with strangers. The Blemmyes are said to have no heads, their mouths and eyes being seated in their breasts. The Satyri, beyond their figure, have nothing in common with the manners of the human race, and the form of the Igipani is such as is commonly represented in paintings. The Hymentopodes are a race of people with feet resembling thongs, upon which they move along by nature with a serpentine, crawling kind of gait. The Pharusiae, descended from the ancient Persians, are said to have been the companions of Hercules when on his expedition to the Hesperides. Beyond the above, I have met with nothing relative to Africa worthy of mention. End of section 29.
Section 30 of The Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder, translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley, Section 30, Book 5, Chapters 9 to 13. Chapter 9. Egypt and Thebais. Joining on to Africa is Asia, the extent of which, according to Demosthenes, from the canopic mouth of the Nile to the mouth of the Euxine, is 2,639 miles. From the mouth of the Euxine to that of Lake Meotis is, according to Eratosthenes, 1,545 miles. The whole distance to the Tanais, including Egypt, is, according to Artemidorus and Isidorus, 6,375 miles. The seas of Egypt, which are several in number, have received their names from those who dwell upon their shores, for which reason they will be mentioned together. Egypt is the country which lies next to Africa. In the interior it runs in a southerly direction, as far as to the territory of the Ethiopians, who lie extended at the back of it. The river Nile, dividing itself, forms on the right and left the boundary of its lower part, which it embraces on every side. By the canopic mouth of that river it is separated from Africa, and by the Pelusiac from Asia, there being a distance between the two of 170 miles. For this reason it is that some persons have reckoned Egypt among the islands, the Nile so dividing itself as to give a triangular form to the land which it encloses; from which circumstance also many persons have named Egypt the Delta, after that of the Greek letter so called. The distance from the spot where the channel of the river first divides into branches to the canopic mouth is 146 miles, and to Pelusiac 166. The upper part of Egypt, which borders on Ethiopia, is known as Thebais. This district is divided into prefectures of towns, which are generally designated as nomes. These are Ombaites, Apollopolites, Hermonthites, Thynites, Faturites, Coptites, Tenterites, Diopolites, Anthiopolites, Aphroditopolites, and Lycopotes. The district which lies in the vicinity of Pelusium contains the following nomes: Pharbithites, Bubastites, Cethroites, and Tanites. The remaining nomes are those called the Arabian, the Hammonian, which lies on the road to the oracle of Jupiter Hammon, and those known by the names of Oxyrhynchites, Leontopolites, Athrabites, Cynopolites, Hermopolites, Xoites, Mendesium, Sebenites, Cabasites, Latopolites, Heliopolites, Prosopites, Panopolites, Busurites, Onuphites, Seites, Tinithu, Phtimphu, Naucritites, Metallites, Gynecopolites, Menalites, all in the region of Alexandria, besides Mariotes in Libya. Heracleopolites is a nome on an island of the Nile, 50 miles in length, upon which there is a city called the City of Hercules. There are two places called Arsinoites. These and Memphites extend to the apex of the delta, adjoining to which, on the side of Africa, are the two nomes of Oesites. Some writers vary in some of these names, and substitute for them other nomes, such as Heropolites and Crocodilopolites. Between Arsinoites and Memphites a lake 250 miles, or, according to what Mucianus says, 450 miles in circumference and 50 paces deep, has been formed by artificial means. After the king by whose orders it was made, it is called by the name of Meris. The distance from thence to Memphis is nearly 62 miles, a place which was formerly the citadel of the kings of Egypt. From thence to the oracle of Hammon it is 12 days' journey. Memphis is 15 miles from the spot where the river Nile divides into the different channels which we have mentioned as forming the delta. Chapter 10. The River Nile. The sources of the Nile are unascertained, and, travelling as it does for an immense distance through deserts and burning sands, it is only known to us by common report, having neither experienced the vicissitudes of warfare, nor been visited by those arms which have so effectually explored all other regions. It rises, so far indeed as King Juba was enabled to ascertain, in a mountain of Lower Mauritania, not far from the ocean, immediately after which it forms a lake of standing water, which bears the name of Neleides. In this lake are found the several kinds of fish known by the names of Alabita, Corrichinus, and Silurus. A crocodile also was brought thence, as a proof that this really is the Nile, and was consecrated by Juba himself in the temple of Isis at Caesarea, where it may be seen at the present day. In addition to these facts, it has been observed that the waters of the Nile rise in the same proportion in which the snows and rains of Mauritania increase. Pouring forth from this lake, the river disdains to flow through arid and sandy deserts, and for a distance of several days' journey conceals itself. After which it bursts forth at another lake of great magnitude in the country of the Masicalae, a people of Mauritania Caesariensis, and thence casts a glance around, as it were, upon the communities of men in its vicinity, giving proofs of its identity in the same peculiarities of the animals which it produces. It then buries itself once again in the sands of the desert, and remains concealed for a distance of 20 days' journey, till it has reached the confines of Ethiopia. Here, when it has once more become sensible of the presence of man, it again emerges, at the same source, in all probability, to which writers have given the name of Niger, or Black. After this, forming the boundary line between Africa and Ethiopia, its banks, though not immediately peopled by man, are the resort of numbers of wild beasts and animals of various kinds. Giving birth in its course to dense forests of trees, it travels through the middle of Ethiopia, under the name of Astapus, a word which signifies, in the language of the nations who dwell in those regions, water issuing from the shades below. Proceeding onwards, it divides innumerable islands in its course, and some of them of such vast magnitude, that although its tide runs with the greatest rapidity, it is not less than 5 days in passing them. When making the circuit of Meroe, the most famous of these islands, the left branch of the river is called Astaboris, or in other words, an arm of the water that issues from the shades, while the right arm has the name of Astasapes, which adds to its original signification the meaning of side. It does not obtain the name of Nile until its waters have again met and are united in a single stream, and even then, for some miles both above and below the point of confluence, it has the name of Cyrus. Homer has given to the whole of this river the name of Aegyptus, while other writers again have called it Triton. Every now and then its course is interrupted by islands which intervene, and which only serve as so many incentives to add to the impetuosity of its torrent; and though at last it is hemmed in by mountains on either side, in no part is the tide more rapid and precipitate. Its waters then hastening onwards, it is borne along to the spot in the country of the Ethiopians, which is known by the name of Catadupai, where, as the last cataract, the complaint is, not that it flows, but that it rushes, with an immense noise between the rocks that lie in its way; after which it becomes more smooth, the violence of its waters is broken and subdued, and, wearied out as it were by the length of the distance it has travelled, it discharges itself, though by many mouths, into the Egyptian sea. During certain days of the year, however, the volume of its waters is greatly increased, and as it traverses the whole of Egypt, it inundates the earth, and, by so doing, greatly promotes its fertility. There have been various reasons suggested for this increase of the river. Of these, however, the most probable are, either that its waters are driven back by the Etesian winds, which are blowing at this season of the year from an opposite direction, and that the sea which lies beyond is driven into the mouths of the river; or else that its waters are swollen by the summer rains of Ethiopia, which fall from the clouds conveyed thither by the Etesian winds from other parts of the earth. Timaeus the mathematician has alleged a reason of an occult nature. He says that the source of the river is known by the name of Phaela, and that the stream buries itself in channels underground, where it sends forth vapours generated by the heat among the steaming rocks amid which it conceals itself, but that during the days of the inundation, in consequence of the sun approaching nearer to the earth, the waters are drawn forth by the influence of his heat, and on being thus exposed to the air overflow, after which, in order that it may not be utterly dried up, the stream hides itself once more. He says that this takes place at the rising of the Dog star, when the sun enters the sign of Leo and stands in a vertical position over the source of the river, at which time at that spot there is no shadow thrown. Most authors, however, are of opinion, on the contrary, that the river flows in greater volume when the sun takes his departure for the north, which he does when he enters the sign of Cancer and Leo, because its waters then are not dried up to so great an extent, while on the other hand, when he returns towards the south pole and re-enters Capricorn, its waters are absorbed by the heat, and consequently flow in less abundance. If there is any one inclined to be of opinion with Timaeus that the waters of the river may be drawn out of the earth by the heat, it will be as well for him to bear in mind the fact that the absence of shadow is a phenomenon which lasts continuously in these regions. The Nile begins to increase at the next new moon after the summer solstice, and rises slowly and gradually as the sun passes through the sign of Cancer. It is at its greatest height while the sun is passing through Leo, and it falls as slowly and gradually as it arose while he is passing through the sign of Virgo. It has totally subsided between its banks, as we learn from Herodotus, on the 100th day, when the sun has entered Libra. While it is rising, it has been pronounced criminal for kings or prefects even to sail upon its waters. The measure of its increase is ascertained by means of wells. Its most desirable height is 16 cubits. If the waters do not attain that height, the overflow is not universal, but if they exceed that measure, by their slowness in receding they tend to retard the process of cultivation. In the latter case the time for sowing is lost, in consequence of the moisture of the soil. In the former, the ground is so parched that the seed time comes to no purpose. The country has reason to make careful note of either extreme. When the water rises to only 12 cubits, it experiences the horrors of famine. When it attains 13, hunger is still the result. A rise of 14 cubits is productive of gladness. A rise of 15 sets all anxieties at rest, while an increase of 16 is productive of unbounded transports of joy. The greatest increase known up to the present time is that of 18 cubits, which took place in the time of the Emperor Claudius. The smallest rise was that of 5 in the year of the battle of Pharsalia, the river by this prodigy testifying its horror, as it were, at the murder of Pompeius Magnus. When the waters have reached their greatest height, the people open the embankments and admit them to the lands. As each district is left by the waters, the business of sowing commences. This is the only river in existence that emits no vapours. The Nile first enters the Egyptian territory at Syene, on the frontiers of Ethiopia. That is the name of a peninsula a mile in circumference, upon which Castra is situate, on the side of Arabia. Opposite to it are the 4 islands of Philae, at a distance of 600 miles from the place where the Nile divides into 2 channels, at which spot, as we have already stated, the delta, as it is called, begins. This, at least, is the distance according to Artemidorus, who also informs us that there were in it 250 towns. Juba says, however, that the distance between these places is 400 miles. Aristocreon says that the distance from Elephantis to the sea is 750 miles, Elephantis being an inhabited island 4 miles below the last cataract, 16 beyond Syene, 585 from Alexandria, and the extreme limit of the navigation of Egypt. To such an extent as this have the above-named authors been mistaken. This island is the place of rendezvous for the vessels of the Ethiopians. They are made to fold up, and the people carry them on their shoulders whenever they come to the cataracts. Chapter 11. Egypt, besides its boast of extreme antiquity, asserts that it contained, in the reign of King Amasis, 20,000 inhabited cities. In our day they are still very numerous, though no longer of any particular note. Still, however, we find the following ones mentioned as of great renown: the city of Apollo, next that of Leucothea, then great Diospolis, otherwise Thebes, known to fame for its 100 gates, Coptos, which from its proximity to the Nile forms its nearest emporium for the merchandise of India and Arabia, then the town of Venus, and then another town of Jupiter. After this comes Tantiris, below which is Abydos, the royal abode of Memnon, and famous for a temple of Osiris, which is situate in Libya, at a distance from the river of 7 miles and a half. Next to it comes Ptolemais, then Panopolis, and then another town of Venus, and on the Libyan side Lycaon, where the mountains form the boundary of the province of Thebais. On passing these we come to the towns of Mercury, Alabastron, the town of Dogs, and that of Hercules already mentioned. We next come to Arsinoe, and Memphis, which has been previously mentioned, between which last and the nome of Arsinoetis, upon the Libyan side, are the towers known as the Pyramids, the labyrinth on Lake Moeris, in the construction of which no wood was employed, and the town of Cryalon. Besides these there is one place in the interior, on the confines of Arabia, of great celebrity, the City of the Sun. With the greatest justice, however, we may lavish our praises upon Alexandria, built by Alexander the Great on the shores of the Egyptian Sea, upon the soil of Africa, at 12 miles distance from the Canopic mouth and near Lake Mareotis, the spot having previously borne the name of Rhacotes. The plan of this city was designed by the architect Dinocores, who is memorable for the genius which he displayed in many ways. Building the city upon a wide space of ground 15 miles in circumference, he formed it in the circular shape of a Macedonian chlamys, uneven at the edge, giving it an angular projection on the right and left, while at the same time he devoted 1/5 part of the site to the royal palace. Lake Mareotis, which lies on the south side of the city, is connected by a canal which joins it to the Canopic mouth, and serves for the purposes of communication with the interior. It has also a great number of islands, and is 30 miles across and 150 in circumference, according to Claudius Caesar. Other writers say that it is 40 sconi in length, making the sconum to be 30 stadia. Hence, according to them, it is 150 miles in length and the same in breadth. There are also, in the latter part of the course of the Nile, many towns of considerable celebrity, and more especially those which have given their names to the mouth of the river. I do not mean all the mouths, for there are no less than 12 of them, as well as 4 others, which the people call the false mouths. I allude to the 7 more famous ones, the Canopic mouth, next to Alexandria, those of Bolbetine, Sebenis, Fatnis, Mendes, Tanis, and, last of all, Pelusium. Besides the above, there are the towns of Butos, Pharbethus, Leontopolis, Arthribis, the town of Isis, Busiris, Kynopolis, Aphrodites, Sais, and Naucritis, from which last some writers call the Naucratic mouth, which is by others called the Heracleotic, and mention it instead of the Canopic mouth, which is the next to it. Chapter 12. The coasts of Arabia situate on the Egyptian Sea. Beyond the Pelusiac mouth is Arabia, which extends to the Red Sea, and joins the Arabia known by the surname of Happy, so famous for its perfumes and its wealth. This is called Arabia of the Catabanes, the Esbonite, and the Skenite. It is remarkable for its sterility, except in the parts where it joins up to Syria, and it has nothing remarkable in it except Mount Cassius. The Arabian nations of the Canclii join these on the east, and on the south the Kedrei, both of which peoples are adjoining to the Nabathei. The 2 gulfs of the Red Sea, where it borders upon Egypt, are called the Heropolitic and the Illenitic. Between the 2 towns of Ilene and Gaza upon our sea, there is a distance of 150 miles. Agrippa says that Arsinoe, a town on the Red Sea, is, by way of the desert, 125 miles from Pelusium. How different the characteristics impressed by nature upon 2 places separated by so small a distance. Chapter 13. Syria. Next to these countries, Syria occupies the coast, once the greatest of lands, and distinguished by many names, for the part which joins up to Arabia was formerly called Palestina, Judea, Coele, and Phoenice. The country in the interior was called Damascena, and that further on and more to the south Babylonia. The part that lies between the Euphrates and the Tigris was called Mesopotamia, that beyond Tauris Saphene, and that on this side of the same chain Commagene. Beyond Armenia was the country of Adiabene, anciently called Assyria, and at the part where it joins up to Cilicia it was called Antiochia. Its length between Cilicia and Arabia is 470 miles, and its breadth from Seleucia Pieria to Zeugma, a town on the Euphrates, 175. Those who make a still more minute division of this country will have it that Phoenice is surrounded by Syria, and that first comes the maritime coast of Syria, part of which is Idumea and Judea, after that Phoenicia, and then Syria. The whole of the tract of sea that lies in front of these shores is called the Phoenician Sea. The Phoenician people enjoy the glory of having been the inventors of letters and the first discoverers of the sciences of astronomy, navigation, and the art of war. End of Section 30. Section 31 of The Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 31. Book 5, Chapters 14 to 19. Chapter 14. Idumea, Palestina, and Samaria. On leaving Pelusium, we come to the camp of Cabrias, Mount Cassius, the temple of Jupiter Cassius, and the tomb of Pompeius Magnus. Ostracine, at a distance of 65 miles from Pelusium, is the frontier town of Arabia. After this, at the point where the Serbonian lake becomes visible, Idumea and Palestina begin. This lake, which some writers have made to be 150 miles in circumference, Herodotus has placed at the foot of Mount Cassius. It is now an inconsiderable fen. The towns are Rhinocolura, and in the interior Raphia, Gaza, and still more inland Anthedon. There is also Mount Argoris. Proceeding along the coast, we come to the region of Samaria, Ascalo, a free town, Azotus, the two Gemnai, one of them in the interior, and Joppe, a city of the Phoenicians, which existed, it is said, before the deluge of the earth. It is situate on the slope of a hill, and in front of it lies a rock, upon which they point out the vestiges of the chains by which Andromeda was bound. Here the fabulous goddess Ceto is worshipped. Next to this place comes Apollonia, and then the tower of Strato, otherwise Caesarea, built by King Herod, but now the colony of Prima Flavia, established by the Emperor Vespasianus. This place is the frontier town of Palestina, at a distance of 188 miles from the confines of Arabia, after which comes Phoenicia. In the interior of Samaria are the towns of Neapolis, formerly called Marmortha, Sebaste, situate on a mountain, and, on a still more lofty one, Gamala. Chapter 15. Judea. Beyond Idumea and Samaria, Judea extends far and wide. That part of it which joins up to Syria is called Galilee, while that which is nearest to Arabia and Egypt bears the name of Perea. This last is thickly covered with rugged mountains, and is separated from the rest of Judea by the river Jordanus. The remaining part of Judea is divided into 10 toparchies, which we will mention in the following order: that of Hiericus, covered with groves of palm trees, and watered by numerous springs, and those of Emmaus, Lydda, Joppe, Acrabatina, Gophna, Tamna, Bethlehem, Orina, in which formerly stood Hierosolima, by far the most famous city, not of Judea only, but of the East, and Herodium, with a celebrated town of the same name. The river Jordanus rises from the spring of Panias, which has given its surname to Caesarea, of which we shall have occasion to speak. This is a delightful stream, and, so far as the situation of the localities will allow of, winds along in its course and lingers among the dwellers upon its banks. With the greatest reluctance, as it were, it moves onward towards Asphaltites, a lake of a gloomy and unpropitious nature, by which it is at last swallowed up, and its bepraised waters are lost sight of on being mingled with the pestilential streams of the lake. For this reason it is that, as soon as ever the valleys through which it runs afford it the opportunity, it discharges itself into a lake, by many writers known as Gennesara, 16 miles in length and 6 wide, which is skirted by the pleasant towns of Julias and Hippo on the east, of Tarichaea on the south, a name which is by many persons given to the lake itself, and of Tiberias on the west, the hot springs of which are so conducive to the restoration of health. Asphaltites produces nothing whatever except bitumen, to which indeed it owes its name. The bodies of animals will not sink in its waters, and even those of bulls and camels float there. In length it exceeds 100 miles, being at its greatest breadth 25, and at its smallest 6. Arabia of the Nomades faces it on the east, and Machaerus on the south, at one time next to Hierosolyma the most strongly fortified place in Judea. On the same side lies Callirrhoe, a warm spring, remarkable for its medicinal qualities, and which by its name indicates the celebrity its waters have gained. Lying on the west of Asphaltites, and sufficiently distant to escape its noxious exhalations, are the Esseni, a people that live apart from the world, and marvellous beyond all others throughout the whole earth, for they have no women among them. To sexual desire they are strangers. Money they have none. The palm trees are their only companions. Day after day, however, their numbers are fully recruited by multitudes of strangers that resort to them, driven thither to adopt their usages by the tempests of fortune, and wearied with the miseries of life. Thus it is that through thousands of ages, incredible to relate, this people eternally prolongs its existence without a single birth taking place there. So fruitful a source of population to it is that weariness of life which is felt by others. Below this people was formerly the town of Angada, second only to Hierosolyma in the fertility of its soil and its groves of palm trees. Now, like it is another heap of ashes. Next to it we come to Masada, a fortress on a rock not far from Lake Asphaltites. Thus much concerning Judea. Chapter 16. Decapolis. On the side of Syria joining up to Judea is the region of Decapolis, so called from the number of its cities, as to which all writers are not agreed. Most of them, however, agree in speaking of Damascus as one, a place fertilized by the river Chrysoros, which is drawn off into its meadows and eagerly imbibed. Philadelphia and Raphana, all which cities fall back towards Arabia. Saetopolis, formerly called Nisa by Father Liber, from his nurse having been buried there, its present name being derived from a Scythian colony which was established there. Gadara, before which the river Hieromyx flows. Hippo, which has been previously mentioned. Dion, Pella, rich with its waters, Galassa, and Canatha. The Tetrarchies lie between and around these cities, equal each of them to a kingdom, and occupying the same rank as so many kingdoms. Their names are Trachonitis, Panias, in which is Caesarea, with the spring previously mentioned, Abyla, Arca, Ampaloesa, and Gebe. Chapter 17. Phoenique. We must now return to the coast, and to Phoenique. There was formerly a town here known as Crocodylon. There is still a river of that name. Dorum and Sycamainon are the names of cities of which the remembrance only exists. We then come to the promontory of Carmelus, and upon the mountain a town of that name, formerly called Akbatana. Next to this are Geta, Geba, and the river Percaida, or Belus, which throws up on its narrow banks a kind of sand from which glass is made. This river flows from the marshes of Candibia, at the foot of Mount Carmelus. Close to this river is Ptolemais, formerly called Aeaci, a colony of Claudius Caesar, and then the town of Ecdippa, and the promontory known as the White Promontory. We next come to the city of Tyre, formerly an island, separated from the mainland by a channel of the sea, of great depth, 700 paces in width, but now joined to it by the works which were thrown up by Alexander when besieging it. The Tyre so famous in ancient times for its offspring, the cities to which it gave birth, Leptis, Utica, and Carthage, that rival of the Roman sway, that thirsted so eagerly for the conquest of the whole earth. Gades too, which she founded beyond the limits of the world. At the present day all her fame is confined to the production of the murex and the purple. Its circumference, including therein Pelletiris, is 19 miles, the place itself extending 22 stadia. The next towns are Sarepta and Ornithon, and then Sidon, famous for its manufacture of glass, and the parent of Thebes in Boeotia. In the rear of this spot begins the chain of Libanus, which extends 1,500 stadia, as far as Semira. This district has the name of Coele-Syria. Opposite to this chain, and separated from it by an intervening valley, stretches away the range of Antilibanus, which was formerly connected with Libanus by a wall. Beyond it, and lying in the interior, is the region of Decapolis, and with it the Tetrarchies already mentioned, and the whole expanse of Palestina. On the coast again, and lying beneath Libanus, is the river Magorus, the colony of Berytus, which bears the name of Felix Julia, the town of Leontos, the river Lycos, Pelebiblos, the river Adonis, and the towns of Byblos, Botris, Gigarta, Triris, Calamos, Tripolis, inhabited by the Tyrians, Sidonians, and Aradians, Orthosia, the river Eleutherus, the towns of Semira and Marathos, and opposite Aradals, a town 7 stadia long, on an island, distant 200 paces from the mainland. After passing through the country in which the before named mountains end and the plains that lie between, Mount Bargelus is seen to rise. Chapter 18. Syria Antiochia. Here Phoenicia ends and Syria recommences. The towns are Carni, Belania, Peltos, and Gabali, then the promontory upon which is situate the free town of Laodicea, and then Diospolis, Heraclea, Charadrus, and Posidium. We then come to the promontory of Syria Antiochia. In the interior is the free city of Antiochia itself, surnamed Epidaphnis, and divided by the river Orontes. On the promontory is Seleucia, called Pieria, a free city. Beyond it lies Mount Cassius, a different one from the mountain of the same name which I have already mentioned. The height of this mountain is so vast that, at the 4th watch of the night, you can see from it, in the midst of the darkness, the sun rising on the east, and thus, by merely turning round, we may at one and the same time behold both day and night. The winding road which leads to its summit is 19 miles in length, its perpendicular height 4. Upon this coast there is the river Orontes, which takes its rise near Heliopolis, between the range of Libanus and Antilibanus. The towns are Rosos, and behind it the gates of Syria, lying in the space between the chain of the Rosian mountains and that of Taurus. On the coast there is the town of Meriandros, and Mount Amenos, upon which is the town of Bometi. This mountain separates Cilicia from Syria. Chapter 19. The remaining parts of Syria. We must now speak of the interior of Syria. Coele-Syria has the town of Apamea, divided by the river Marsyas from the tetrarchy of the Nazarini. Bambix, the other name of which is Hierapolis, but by the Syrians called Mabok, here the monster Atargatis, called Derketo by the Greeks, is worshipped. and the place called Chalcis on the Belus, from which the region of Chalkidene, the most fertile part of Syria, takes its name. We here also find Cerestici, with Cherem, the Gazati, the Gendarini, the Gabini, the two Tetrarchies called Granicomati, the Emesini, the Helati, the nation of the Eturii, and a branch of them, the people called the Betarini, the Mariamitani, the Tetrarchy known as Mamysia, Paradissus, Pagri, the Pinariti, two cities called Seleucia, besides the one already mentioned, the one Seleucia on the Euphrates, and the other Seleucia on the Belus, and the Carditenses. The remaining part of Syria, except those parts which will be spoken of in conjunction with the Euphrates, contains the Arethusae, the Beruenses, and the Epiphanienses, and on the east the Laodiceni, which are called the Laodiceni on the Libanus, the Leucadiae, and the Larissii, besides 17 other tetrarchies, divided into kingdoms and bearing barbarous names. End of section 31.
Section 32 of the Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joyce Martin. The Natural History, Volume 1 by Pliny the Elder, translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 32. Chapter 20. The Euphrates. This place, too, will be the most appropriate one for making some mention of the Euphrates. This river rises in Charonitis, a prefecture of Greater Armenia, according to the statement of those who have approached the nearest to its source. Domitius Corbulo says that it rises in Mount Abba. Licinius Malsianus at the foot of a mountain which he calls Capotes, 12 miles above Zimara, and that at its source it has the name of Pyroxtes. It first flows past Dirksene and then Anatica, shutting out the regions of Armenia from Cappadocia. Dascusa is distant from Zimara 75 miles. From this spot it is navigable as far as Sartona, a distance of 50 miles. Thence to Melitene in Cappadocia, distant 74 miles, and thence to Elegia in Armenia, distant 10 miles, receiving in its course the rivers Lycus, Arsanius, and Arsenos. At Algea it meets the range of Mount Taurus, but no effectual resistance is offered to its course, although the chain is here 12 miles in width. At its passage between the mountains the river bears the name of Uma, but afterwards, when it has passed through, it receives that of Euphrates. Beyond this spot it is full of rocks, and runs with an impetuous tide. It then divides that part of Arabia which is called the country of the Ori on the left, by a channel 3 scioni in width, from the territory of the Commageni on the right, and it admits of a bridge being thrown across it, even where it forces a passage through the range of Taurus. At Claudiopolis, in Cappadocia, it takes an easterly direction, and here, for the first time in this contest, Taurus turns it out of its course. Though conquered before and rent asunder by its channel, the mountain chain now gains the victory in another way, and breaking its career compels it to take a southerly direction. Thus is this warfare of nature equally waged, the river proceeding onward to the destination which it intends to reach, and the mountains forbidding it to proceed by the path which it originally intended. After passing the cataracts, the river again becomes navigable, and at a distance of 48 miles from thence, in Samosata, the capital of Comagene. Chapter 21. Syria upon the Euphrates. Arabia, mentioned above, has the cities of Edessa, formerly called Antiochia, and from the name of its fountain, Calarohe, and Carrhae, memorial for the defeat of Crassus there. Adjoining to this is the prefecture of Mesopotamia, which derives its origin from the Assyrians, and in which are the towns of Anthemusia and Nisporium, after which come the Arabians, known by the name of Pratabi, with Singara for their capital. Below Samosata, on the side of Syria, the river Marsyas flows into the Euphrates. At Singilia ends the territory of Comagene, and the state of the Emi begins. The cities which are here washed by the river are those of Epiphania and Antiochia, generally known as Epiphania and Antiochia on the Euphrates. Also Zeugma, 72 miles distant from the Samosata, famous for the passage there across the Euphrates. Opposite to it is Apamea, which Seleucus, the founder of both cities, united by a bridge. The people who join up to Mesopotamia are called the Roali. Other towns in Syria are those of Europus and what was formerly Thapsacus, now Amphipolis. We then come to the Arabian Senate. The Euphrates then proceeds in its course till it reaches the place called Ura, at which, taking a turn to the east, it leaves the Syrian deserts of Palmyra, which extend as far as the city of Petra and the regions of Arabia Felix. Palmyra is a city famous for the beauty of its site, the riches of its soil, and the delicious quality and abundance of its water. Its fields are surrounded by sands on every side, and are thus separated, as it were, by nature from the rest of the world. Though placed between the two great empires of Rome and Parthia, it still maintains its independence, never failing, at the very first moment that a rupture between them is threatened, to attract the careful attention of both. It is distant 337 miles from Seleucia of the Parthians, generally known as Seleucia on the Tigris, 203 from the nearest part of the Syrian coast, and 27 less from Damascus. Below the deserts of Palmyra is the region of Stellendene and Hierapolis, Beroea, and Chalcis, already mentioned. Beyond Palmyra, Emesa takes to itself a portion of these deserts. Also Elatium, nearer to Petra by 1/2 than Damascus. At no great distance from Sura is Philiscium, a town of the Parthians on the Euphrates. From this place it is 10 days' sail to Seleucia, and nearly as many to Babylon. At a distance of 594 miles beyond Zeugma, near the village of Massise, the Euphrates divides into two channels, the left one of which runs through Mesopotamia, past Seleucia, and falls into the Tigris as it flows around that city. Its channel on the right runs toward Babylon, the former capital of Chaldea, and flows through the middle of it, and then through another city, the name of which is Otris, after which it becomes lost in the marshes. Like the Nile, this river increases at stated times and at much about the same period. When the sun has reached the 20th degree of Cancer, it inundates Mesopotamia, and after he has passed through Leo and entered Virgo, its waters begin to subside. By the time the sun has entered the 29th degree of Virgo, the river has fully regained its usual height. Chapter 22. Cilicia and the adjoining nations. But let us now return to the coast of Syria, joining up to which is Cilicia, where we find the river Diaphanes, Mount Crocodilus, the gates of Mount Amanius, the rivers Androcus, Paneris, and Lycus, the Gulf of Issos, and the town of that name, then Alexandria, the river Chlorus, the free town of Age, the river Paramus, the gates of Cilicia, the towns of Malus and Magarosus, and in the interior Tarsus. We then come to the Aeolian plains, the town of Cassipolis, Mopsos, a free town in the river Paramus, Thynos, Zephirium, and Ankylae. Next to these, are the rivers Saros and Cydnus, the latter of which, at some distance from the sea, runs through the free city of Tarsus, the region of Celenderitis, with a town of similar name, the place where Nymphaeum stood, solely of Cilicia, now called Pompeiapolis, Adana, Sibera, Pinare, Pedale, Ale, Selinus, Arcione, Iatope, Duron, and near the sea, Corycos, there being a town, port, and cave, all of the same name. Passing these, we come to the river Calicadnus, the promontory of Sarpedon, the towns of Home and Myle, and the promontory and town of Venus, at a short distance from the island of Cyprus. On the mainland there are the towns of Myanda, Anamurium, and Corascium, and the river Melas, the ancient boundary of Cilicia. In the interior, the places more especially worthy of mention are Anazarbus, now called Caesarea, Augusta, Castabla, Epiphania, formerly called Eniandos, Alusa, Iconium, Seleucia upon the river Chalcednus, surnamed Trachiotis, a city removed from the seashore, where it had the name of Homea. Besides those already mentioned, there are in the interior the river Liparis, Bombos, Paradisus, and Mount Imbarus. Chapter 23. Isauria and the Homenades. All the geographers have mentioned Pamphylia as joining up to Cilicia without taking any notice of the people of Isauria. Its cities are in the interior Isaura, Syllabanus, and Lalasis. It runs down toward the sea by the side of Amanurium, already mentioned. In a similar manner also, all who have treated of this subject have been ignorant of the existence of the nation of the Homenades bordering upon Isauria, and their town of Homona in the interior. There are 44 other fortresses which lie concealed amid rugged crags and valleys. Chapter 24. The Pisidae. The Pisidae, formerly called the Solimi, occupy the higher parts of the mountains. In their country there is the colony of Caesarea, also called Antiochia, and the towns of Oroanda and Sagalassosus. Chapter 25. Lycaonia. These people are bounded by Lycaonia, which belongs to the jurisdiction of the province of Asia, to which also resort the people of Philomellenium, Timbrium, Leucolithium, Pelta, and Tyrium. To this jurisdiction is also added a tetrarchy of Lycaonia on that part which joins up to Galatia, containing 14 states, with the famous city of Iconium. In Lycaonia itself the most noted places are Thebasa on Taurus and Hyde on the confines of Galatia and Cappadocia. On the western side of Lycaonia and above Pamphylia come the Meli, a people descended from the Thracians. Their city is Aracanda. Chapter 26. Pamphylia. The former name of Pamphylia was Mopsopia. The Pamphylian sea joins up to that of Cilicia. The towns of Pamphylia are Side, Aspendium, situate on the side of a mountain, Palintensium, and Perga. There is also the promontory of Liacola, the mountains of Sardemnisus, and the rivers Eurymedon, which flows past Aspendus, and Cataractus, near to which is Lyarnesus, also the towns of Olbia and Phalesis, the last on the coast. Chapter 27. Mount Taurus. Adjoining to Pamphylia is the Sea of Lycia and the country of Lycia itself, where the chain of Taurus, coming from the eastern shores, terminates the vast gulf by the promontory of Chalidonium. Of immense extent and separating nations innumerable, after taking its first rise at the Indian Sea, it branches off to the north on the right-hand side and on the left toward the south. Then, taking a direction toward the west, it would cut through the middle of Asia, were it not that the seas check it in its triumphant career along the land. It accordingly strikes off in a northerly direction, and, forming an arc, occupies an immense tract of country, nature, designedly, as it were, every now and then throwing seas in the way to oppose its career. Here the Sea of Phoenicia, there the Sea of Pontus, in this direction the Oespian and the Hyrcanian, and then opposite to them the Lake Meotis. Although somewhat curtailed by these obstacles, it still winds along between them, and makes its way even amidst these barriers. And victorious after all, it then escapes with its sinuous course to the kindred chain of the Riphaean mountains. Numerous are the names which it bears, as it is continuously designed by new ones throughout the whole of its course. In the first part of its career it has the name of Imaeus, after which it is known successively by the names of Aemodus, Peloponnesus, Circeus, Cambates, Paredris, Coetrias, Origes, Oroandes, Nyphantes, Taurus, and where it even outtops itself, Caucasus. Where it throws forth its arms as though every now and then it would attempt to invade the sea, it bears the names of Sarpedon, Coracius, Cragus, and then again Taurus. Where also it opens and makes a passage to admit mankind, it still claims the credit of an unbroken continuity by giving the name of gates to these passes, which in one place are called the Gates of Armenia, in another the Gates of the Caspian, and in another the Gates of Cilicia. In addition to this, when it has been cut short in its onward career, it retires to a distance from the seas and covers itself on the one side and on the other with the names of numerous nations, being called on the right-hand side the Hyrcanian and the Caspian, and on the left the Parjadrian and the Moschkian, the Amazonian, the Coraxican, and the Scythian chain. Among the Greeks it bears the one general name of Sarunian. Chapter 28. Lycia. In Lycia, after leaving its promontory, we come to the town of Cymena, Mount Chimera, which sends forth flames by night, and the city of Hephaestium, the heights above which are also frequently on fire. Here, too, formerly stood the city of Olympus. Now we find the mountain places known as Gage, Cordalia, and Rhodiopolis. Near the sea is Limraia, and a river of like name, into which the Aracandus flows, Mount Mesites, the state of Andriaca, Myra, the towns of Aperi and Optiphalos, formerly called Hebesus, and in a corner Phalos, after which comes Pyra, and then the city of Xanthus, 15 miles from the sea, as also a river known by the same name. We then come to Patara, formerly Pataros, and Sedima, situate on a mountain. Next comes the promontory of Cragus, and beyond it a gulf, equal to the one that comes before it. Upon it are Pinara and Talmisus, the frontier town of Lycia. Lycia formerly contained 70 towns, now it has but 36. Of these the most celebrated, besides those already mentioned, are Canus, Candaba, so celebrated for the Aenean grove, Podalia, Coma, past which the river Edessa flows, Seranae, Ascandalis, Amilas, Noscopion, Telos, and Telandrus. It includes also in the interior the district of Cabalia, the 3 cities of which are Ayananda, Balbura, and Buban. On passing Telmasus we come to the Asiatic, or Carpathian Sea, and the district which is properly called Asia. Agrippa has divided this region into 2 parts, one of which he has bounded on the east by Phrygia and Laconia, and on the west by the Aegean Sea, on the south by the Egyptian Sea, and on the north by the Paphlagonia, making its length to be 473 miles and its breadth 320. The other part he has bounded by the Lesser Armenia on the east, Phrygia, Laconia, and Pamphylia on the west, the province of Pontus on the north, and the Sea of Pamphylia on the south, making it 575 miles in length and 325 in breadth. End of section 32. Recording by Joyce Martin.